Good afternoon, members of the committee. Thank y'all for coming together. Looks like we have a quorum at this point. Chairman Roberts is presenting a bill in another committee right now. We'll be here shortly, but we're going to go ahead and get this committee meeting started. And at this time, I'd like to recognize Representative Sims to present House Resolution 1177.
Madam Chair, we do have one. We did meet yesterday, and we have an accumulation of the road namings, but we do have one additional. It's 1602, which we will add to the list. Representative Alan Powell. So 1177 will be our lead. Will be carried by Representative Williams, and that's that will be it. Do you need me to name all of them, or just? Thank you. As amended. Thank you.
Is that what you said? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you, Representative Sims. And as I said, Representative Chuck Williams will be carrying this bill. Perfect timing. The chairman has just arrived. Okay. At this time, I'd like to recognize Chairman Jacobs to bring before us House Bill 1051. Or which, yeah, that'd be fine. Which one do you want to start? What are you starting with? 51, 52? Okay. We'll do 51 and 52.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because I tend to be animated when I present bills, I figured I'd be better off down here. All right. Ladies and gentlemen of the Transportation Committee, I bring before you today House Bill 1051 and House Bill 1052. These are companion bills, and I'll explain what they do in a second, but I do want to start off by saying that the formulation of these bills began with a process in my committee, the MARTA Oversight Committee, where we appointed a subcommittee that we entitled the Governance Subcommittee that Representative Lynn Riley from Johns Creek chaired. And we had several meetings in the off-season between legislative sessions to one, consider some refinements to the MARTA Act, the enabling legislation for MARTA, and two, hear from MARTA as to what they might like in terms of some improvements to the existing MARTA Act. And what out of that process, both requests from MARTA and additional changes that we identified, you have House Bill 1052. Now, House Bill 1051, and I'm sorry, on 1052 I'm working from a substitute LC 390184S. House Bill 1051, we're working from the original as introduced version of the bill. House Bill 1051, there are two provisions that in House Bill 277 we basically exported provisions of the MARTA Act into the General Code and superseded the MARTA Act with those two provisions. One deals with the 50-50 split, and the other deals with the structure of the MARTA board. Those are in the general OCGA code today. The thinking on the MARTA Act revisions is that we want to, in essence, with some changes, particularly on the board structure, we want to bring those back home into the MARTA Act, and so what House Bill 1051 does is repeals the two code sections, and then I'll show you how they are handled in terms of putting them back in the MARTA Act in House Bill 1052. But that's all that 1051 does, is repeals two code sections in the OCGA that deal with MARTA. Now, 1052 is the changes to the MARTA Act. The MARTA Act is a piece of local legislation that's enabled by an old-timey critter known as a local constitutional amendment that was adopted back in the 1960s. The MARTA Act itself is a local act, and you have to advertise, just by way of education, you have to advertise with a legal ad in the legal organs of Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, Gwinnett, and Clayton counties in order to amend it. That legal ad has been run. Let me walk you through the provisions of the bill quickly. Section 1 of the bill deals with the board structure. What we started off, the starting point for this particular provision was that we brought back the provisions that were put in the code by House Bill 277 and imported them into the language of the MARTA Act that was superseded. So we basically recreated the language that was put in the general code in the MARTA Act provision, and then we made a couple of changes. One was a change that was requested by MARTA, and that is that when we put that general statutory provision in, we did not provide for staggering of the board terms. So meaning when the MARTA board is appointed by Fulton County, DeKalb County, and the City of Atlanta, all of the board members take office at the same time, and their terms all expire at the same time. So this bill provides, House Bill 1052 provides for staggering of the board terms, and that is down around roughly lines 30 through 40 there. We also are changing the structure of the board a little bit in this bill from what exists in the general code. First of all, right now the Fulton County government has 3 appointments, 2 who reside north of the City of Atlanta and 1 that resides south of the City of Atlanta. We are moving the 2 north of the City of Atlanta appointments, and I should also say there is roughly twice as much population north of the City of Atlanta as there is south of the City of Atlanta, so that's why that's 2 to 1. We are moving the 2 board appointments from the northern part of the county, from the Fulton County government, to a caucus of the mayors of North Fulton, recognizing the fact that all of North Fulton, north of the City of Atlanta, is now in a city. And frankly, during the TIA process, the roundtable process, it was the mayors up in that neck of the woods who were really leading the charge on transportation policy, particularly Mayor Mike Bodker, and we also heard quite a bit from Mayor Eva Galambos as well. So we are seeking to move those 2 appointments to the mayors of North Fulton County. In addition, we move 1 DeKalb County appointment from the DeKalb County Commission to a caucus of the mayors of DeKalb County. And finally, there are 2 state members right now. There is the GDOT board. There's the GDOT commissioner who serves on the MARTA board, and there's the executive director of GRETA. The way it's structured right now, the GDOT commissioner is the commissioner here, by the way? All right. You don't have a problem with this, I hope. It doesn't look like he does. Hey, you got to ask before you move forward, right? So I just did. There are two state members of the MARTA board: the GDOT commissioner who has a vote, and the GRETA executive director who doesn't. Historically, the commissioner does not attend MARTA board meetings. The GRETA executive director almost always does, but does not have a vote. So what we are seeking to do here is remove the GDOT commissioner from the board and give the voting position to the GRETA executive director. Certainly, Mr. Chairman.
Let me. I know you asked the commissioner did he have a problem with it, but I really. I think that either, to be honest with you, Representative Jacobs, that we need to we need GDOT involved, in my opinion, whether it be the commissioner or maybe the planning director. But in my opinion, we need the State Department of Transportation involved in this, because they're the agency that a lot of people are still looking to outside of it what's going on. Well, I mean, so I would say that while I am very cognizant to the fact of Greta and what they do, I mean, they do a wonderful job over there. But I would say we should also look at making sure that we keep GDOT very involved in this process, in my opinion.
Okay.
As we move forward.
Let me ask.
And I apologize because I'm just going through this as well.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Chairman. If we were to move the voting position, given that you have Greta there almost always and GDOT there not nearly as frequently, what if we were to move the voting position to Greta, but then allow someone from GDOT to serve non-voting ex officio?
Well, and I would argue with you this, and I'm not saying that may not be the way that we go with it, but if I'm not a voting member, I'm not coming. I mean, and in all honesty, that's the way a lot of people. I mean, we don't go to meetings that we're not members of here. I mean, and I say that with all due respect, that people tend to some do. You're right, but I mean, overall, we don't go to every meeting if we don't have a vote on it. So we'll talk. Let's talk as we move forward. Let me go on through here, but I haven't read it neither. I'm reading it as we go through it here. That's just a concern that we need to look at.
Certainly, and I will say again, I mean, the one thing we need to be cognizant of if we address that in the bill is that, generally speaking, you have a much higher, substantially, infinitely higher rate of attendance by the Greta. I mean, Janine Miller is almost always at MARTA board meetings, whereas infrequently you see the GDOT commissioner. So at least in terms of who votes and how that structures and how that fits in with the board structure, I think we need to make it fit the reality of the situation. So those are the changes to the board structure, and that's all there in Section 1. Section 2 of the bill deals with procurement. There are two provisions, and these were picked out in kind of the MARTOC review of the MARTA Act. One is in Section A of the bill. There is a provision that accepts from low bidding, from the request for bid process, certain consultants or professional services providers, and those are all listed there on lines 174 and 175. We want to make clear in that provision that even though you are accepted from low bidding, from the request for bid process, you still have to follow a transparent request for proposals process, or in the case of engineers engineers and architects, there is federal law, the Brooks Act, that governs how you have to do procurement in that area. And so we want to make clear that even though you're not subject to a low bid bidding process, you are still subject to a transparent request for proposals, or otherwise set out in federal statutory process that has to be out there for all the public to see when you are selecting professional service providers. Subsection K we strike through in its entirety. That is a provision that says that in a request for bids scenario, MARTA does not have to, if they get no bids on when they put a request for bids out, they don't have to then rebid it out. They're welcome to negotiate with whomever they want. MARTA pushed back on that a little bit and said, well, what if we get one bidder who's not, not within the range we want them to be in? They're a little bit high. We'd like to go and be able to negotiate with them. We think, after thinking through that the better policy is to require it to continue to be a transparent process. And so the initial proposal was to strike through that provision that says that you don't have to put it back out for bid. And we are proposing with this revision of the bill to go ahead and strike through that so that you do in fact have to put something back out for bid if you get no bids in a request for bid situation. Section 3 of the bill is a request from MARTA, and that is that they are required to provide certain reports in paper format to every local government in the 5-county area that's covered by the MARTA Act. So every city, the county governments, and every city in Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, Gwinnett, and Clayton counties, they have to deliver a paper copy of certain reports to. Their request was that they still provide the reports, but that they post them on the internet and make them available to the local governments that way. I think that that makes a lot of sense, especially given that really your only participating counties at this time in MARTA are Fulton and DeKalb counties, and it seems kind of onerous to have to ship paper copies out to every local government across 5 counties. Section 4 of the bill, when MARTA does its capital improvements budget, we would like for them to, right there in the budget, benchmark that budget against what has been done in the past 10 years. What you budgeted, what you actually accomplished over the course of the past 10 years, and put that directly in the document. So that's what Section 4 of the bill does. Section 5 of the bill deals with contracts, not with contracts to extend the existing MARTA rail system. It deals with contracts where MARTA is going to provide either construction or operational or maintenance services for a rail project. And MARTA sought to have this provision here on lines 232 and 233 removed. What we have decided is a good policy here is to say, well, okay, that's fine. You can contract with a local government to help construct, operate, or maintain a rail system. However, you cannot own it. It has to be the local government. I mean, it has to be the local government system, and it has to be the local government's choice to contract with you. Okay, and then second of all, as a second check on that, we are requiring in this bill express written consent from the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority as a means of oversight over that. But again, what we are saying here in the bill is not that you are, again, there's 2 types of contracts. I want to be very clear about this. There is the actual rapid transit contract, which is MARTA operates in your jurisdiction. MARTA Rail exists in your jurisdiction, and that is under Section 24 of the MARTA Act, which is not handled by this bill. Section 24A is a different creature altogether, and it's known as a transportation services contract, and it's simply MARTA contracting with a local government to provide services to that local government to the extent the local government wants to contract with MARTA in that regard. I'll be happy to. I see a couple questions. I'll be happy to answer that. Can't answer them now since we're here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you give us a real world scenario on Section 4 or Section 5 that we're dealing with right here?
Real world scenario might well be the streetcar in Atlanta, wouldn't it? I'll turn to MARTA on that. Sorry, I don't mean to put you all on the spot, but
could it be to areas outside of the MARTA geographic taxing zone? So could it be with say Gwinnett County or a Cobb County?
It could be,
where they could extend a rail line and operate it through MARTA without being under the 1 cent sales tax?
Yeah, that would be correct. However, again, MARTA cannot own it. It has to be the county's. It ultimately has to be the county government's system. So
how would that work?
How would it work?
How would it work? The local county would put up a bond of some sort to construct it, and they would consult with MARTA because MARTA doesn't construct their own right now, do they? They hire people to do that or bid it out?
Well, they hire people to do that, but ultimately it is MARTA. When MARTA does a construction yes, they hire a contractor to actually build out the project, but it's MARTA building the project. The point is that they can help build the project. If they're contracted to help operate or maintain the project, they can do that too, but they can't own the project. It has to be, MARTA owns its system, okay? And that's really the fundamental difference between Section 24 and Section 24A. Section 24A, we're basically saying you can't own the system. Okay?
But the current law says that they can't construct either.
Correct.
And but basically, we're doing away with that and saying that they can, and they're authorized to contract with other cities outside of the MARTA Act. Cities and counties. I apologize.
That would be correct. I mean, that's what that provision does. And
I'm looking for the impact of that. What exactly does that mean, and what exactly does that expose the surrounding areas to?
Well, it has no impact whatsoever if your local government in Henry County isn't looking to do a rail project of any kind that MARTA would be involved in. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line there. But
it doesn't prevent them from doing it. Where in current law it does.
Correct. That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was my point.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say. I mean, let's continue to talk about that as we.
Do you agree with that?
I mean, that is I mean, just flat out, that is the current impact of lines 232 and 233. We're looking to allow MARTA to be able to participate in building a rail project or helping to operate or maintain one if a local government wants to do that, but ultimately it's not going to be MARTA's system. It's going to be the local governments.
Right, prior to the meeting, if I have permission to discuss our conversation prior to the meeting, I asked you two questions. Was one, does your bill any way impose the 1 cent MARTA tax on Henry County? And two, does it by any ways allow for MARTA to be expanded into Henry County? And you said no to both of those. But what I'm hearing right now is the bill does open it up.
Well, I don't view this as an expansion of MARTA into Henry County. That would be a Section 24 contract.
But it would allow for it.
It would allow if Henry
County.
I understand if Henry County wanted to build a rail project, okay, of some kind, it would allow for them to, if they want, if it would allow for MARTA to be contracted to maintain, operate, or construct that project, yes, but it would not. Again, I want to be real clear. It's not MARTA's project, so it is not MARTA. I mean, it's MARTA as a service provider, not MARTA as MARTA.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I just need a little clarification of the bill that's being presented to us. This bill is coming from is it Martok? So they're submitting this. It's been approved by Martok and submitted to the transportation. Is that correct, or is this just an individual bill that's being presented by the presenter?
No.
Yeah. On behalf of Martok.
Well, to a point.
Yeah. To be clear, the role of my committee is to oversee the governance and budget and fiscal affairs of MARTA. It is not a legislative committee. And so, as part of the governance role of MARTA, we sought to review the MARTOC. We sought to review the MARTA Act, and we did that. But ultimately, that has to result in a piece of legislation being introduced and going through the regular legislative process through regular legislative committees. We are not a legislative committee. We are an oversight committee that exists by virtue of a joint resolution of the House and Senate.
Mr. Chairman, if I could further clarify my question. The reason I ask that is because this bill has metro, it affects quite a few of the counties and areas here. And I was just wondering what other support, what other sponsors of this bill there might be.
I mean,
I don't see it, the documents that I have.
Well, if you look at House Bill 1051, at minimum I had Representatives Riley, Lindsay, Geisinger, and Tom Taylor, and I don't, recall who the others were.
Okay, well, I didn't see that on intent. Well, I would have.
Well, 1051 and 1052 were signed by the same people.
Right, I see that now. Okay, all right. Thank you.
And then finally,
I
section.
have a question too.
Mm-hmm.
I know, talking about MARTA being able to operate or construct in another county outside of Fulton and DeKalb. The local governments would still have to approve for the funding. I mean, they basically would have to request that MARTA through intergovernmental agreement. How would that work? Would it be through
intergovernmental agreement? And it would 100% be driven by the local government. I mean, MARTA would be, in essence, here acting as a contractor.
So one would assume that if you're going to expand rail into a community, there would have to be a vote. There had to be funds, so potentially a vote by the voters, a referendum, to make that happen.
Correct.
So
yeah, I mean, again, a Section 24A transportation services contract is basically MARTA acting as a contractor, and that is completely driven by the local government. And we're adding an extra check on that Greta would, in the bill, that Greta would have to sign off on the contract.
But it would be up to the locals to fully fund that, if that was...
It would be up to the locals, that's correct.
To fully fund that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any expansions, though, do they not have a voter referendum? By this, they could just simply contract without going to the voters for approval to do it, correct? They just sign a contract.
But basically not to... No.
No?
No, because that is I mean, it took me a while to kind of see how this lays out in the MARTA Act, but that's a Section 24. I always have to get the terminology right. Hold on. That is a Section 24 rapid transit contract, okay, which means that MARTA is... that you are a MARTA county, okay, and you are participating in the existing MARTA rail system. A transportation services contract, which is Section 24A of the MARTA Act, it's a whole different section, basically deals with MARTA as a contractor. It would be like, for example, using the bus analogy, okay? Gwinnett and Cobb contract with Veolia to run their bus service. It's MARTA acting as a contractor.
All right, so getting after what I'm looking at right now, let's take Henry out of the picture. Let's talk about Gwinnett County. Gwinnett County wants to do a MARTA rail line up to Gwinnett Mall or North Georgia Mall or whatever that is up there. They want to do a rail line up there. But they don't want to do a MARTA rail line. They just want to do the Gwinnett rail line that connects to the MARTA rail line at Tucker, or wherever that northernmost point of 85 is. They want to do that. They could, without going back to the MARTA Act and getting a referendum of the voters in Gwinnett County to expand MARTA rail there, they could simply contract with MARTA and do a Gwinnett rail line without the approval of the voters. Is that what you're telling me?
No.
Okay, then how would it work?
Again, what Gwinnett is deciding to do in that scenario is build a rail line. And it would be as though, I mean, in this regard, I mean, think of it this way. In this regard, MARTA would be competing with other players in this area like Veolia, okay? In fact, to
expand MARTA, you need a voter referendum in Gwinnett, correct?
Right, but that's,
okay.
Again, that's a Section 24.
You're leaning on it, Tom. That's all right. So yeah, time is up, guys. No, but we're talking semantics there, though. If there's a rail line that connects with the MARTA line, okay, regardless of what it's called, if it's a MARTA line, they have a voter referendum. If it's a GARDA, Gwinnett Area Rapid Transit Authority line, that's not a referendum of the voters.
Well, I mean,
is that not true? Because to contract, they don't need a voter referendum. But to expand MARTA, they need a voter referendum.
Right, but the point is that this is not an expansion of MARTA. That is a rail services contract. Again, this is MARTA as it's MARTA as MARTA, which is Section 24, versus MARTA as a simple contractor that is doing business with a county. It's doing business with a county versus being the transit system of that county. It's different.
I'll let Representative Dollar.
And this, I guess, I can address this question to you and to Chairman Davis. Is the portion that he's not talking about addressed in? I think we're on the page 3, line 93. That such contract shall not become valid and binding unless the same is approved by a majority of the voting in said referendum.
That's correct, and that applies. Those are Section 24 flat out rail services contracts.
So they
That's
can
right.
contract, but it doesn't become binding until a referendum on it.
Or, I'm sorry, rapid transit contract. Pardon me?
So they can contract.
They could that's
They
right.
can contract, but it wouldn't become binding until a referendum. That's how I'm reading this. It's not.
No, that's not correct. They could
Okay.
contract. They could. It would be that's not correct.
Then what referendum are they talking? Is this section?
That would be
referencing?
if Gwinnett or Cobb actually wanted MARTA to expand into their
Yes,
county
I
as
understand
MARTA,
that. Mhm.
then that would be a Section 24 contract, okay, and you'd have to have a referendum. And you'd be subject to the penny sales tax, correct. Section 24A is basically MARTA contracting like any contractor to build something for a county government if that's what they're looking for, basically.
Thank you. I was just imagining how Gwinnett County or Henry County, for that matter, would be able to build a rail line without federal dollars. I mean, one of the issues around the development of MARTA is being able to have money to bring down federal dollars. I mean, these are huge expenditures, and I know Fulton and DeKalb can't do it alone, and it wasn't built alone only by Fulton and DeKalb dollars. But that's sort of a side issue. I mean, that's really not, that's not the issue for me. I understand it is for you and maybe for people from Gwinnett. So it's a different matter. But while I have the mic, I would just like to commend the MARTOC chairman for his careful, thoughtful, legal analysis of what needs to happen to update the MARTA Act. I mean, it is refreshing to have such good, thoughtful leadership, and maybe that gives the Representative Jacobs a moment to figure out an answer to the question.
A question to me?
I don't know.
I think I've already addressed the question.
All right. We'll let you continue on, Mr. Chairman.
All right, and then Section 6 of the bill is just actually a restatement of the existing law regarding the 50-50 split. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the 50-50 split, let me explain what it is quickly. It's a creature in the MARTA Act that says that MARTA, for every penny sale, for every dollar it brings in as a result of the MARTA penny sales tax, it can only use 50% of it on the operations side of the house, and 50% of it has to go to the capital side of the house. It was enacted to prevent MARTA from growing exponentially in the operations area, such that they're unable to maintain capital. Obviously, there is a fair bit of discussion over that particular provision these days. However, I will say this. I personally believe that it is still important for MARTA to have some level of constraint on the operations side of the house. And while we have, or at least that there be some safeguard to ensure that that the capital side of the house is cared for. Okay, so while we have relaxed the 50-50 split through 2013, and I am willing to explore perhaps taking that out a year or two more at some point if that becomes necessary. I would much prefer that we actually figure out a way to deal with the capital assets of MARTA in a more global way, and that, of course, has been part of the transit governance discussion here at the Capitol that's been ongoing for about a year. Now, as you know, there is a bill that proposes to, in exchange for MARTA contracting with Greta as part of that transit governance piece, do away with the 50-50 split. I think that is an appropriate trade-off. And so for the time being, this bill leaves the 50-50 split exactly where it is. I would request that the committee approve the bill or approve that provision the way that it reads right now. And then again, we'll see what happens with any governance bill this session. Certainly, if we need to extend that period out for another year or two, we can take a look at it as the bill moves forward in the session. All right, I'm finished with the presentation of the bill.
Thank you, Representative Jacobs. Do we have any other questions for Representative? All right. Representative Davis?
Madam Chair, I'd like to offer an amendment at the proper time, just on notice there. But since you're done with the presentation, obviously I have concerns about Section 5. And I don't think, Representative Gardner, that it's limited to simply to rail. It's to any MARTA service. I think it's inclusive of rail, and it specifically says including all forms. But it's not limited to just rail. It could be bus service or other forms of MARTA services. So I just wanted to make that comment before any motions are made that I want to make a motion.
Okay.
Or an amendment. Offer an amendment.
Thank you. Representative Gardner?
Thank you very much. As many of you know, I represent both Fulton and DeKalb counties. In fact, my district is contiguous with Representative Jacobs' district. We represent some of the same neighborhoods. So we do have very similar interests in making sure that MARTA survives and thrives. The amendment that I'm going to present would give MARTA the freedom to go ahead and run their business like any other corporation. I mean, we have in the MARTA leadership hired a very highly professional staff, an executive director who knows more about transit than anyone else in the United States. But this 50-50 provision continues to tie her hands. I mean, all corporations have financial limitations, but the limitations that have been applied to MARTA with some uncertainty, some years they get 60-40, some years they get 55-45. So those changing scenarios have made it a very difficult management task. All the things that MARTA does are not 3-year projects. They are, I mean, minimum bonding is for 20-year projects. So for that reason, the amendment that I'm going to propose will eliminate, will turn the MARTA authority into a professional organization managed by a board which Representative Jacobs has done some amending to. I have no objections to his recreation of the board, other than I hope we don't do it every 2 years. It doesn't make for a good governing situation. But there are two things going on in my neighborhood, and that is that I really want the T-SPLOST to pass. I don't have my button on, but those of us who are concerned about economic development in the metro Atlanta area believe the T-SPLOST is a key. And MARTA's survival, in my opinion, is a cornerstone to the T-SPLOST and what we would be able to create through the T-SPLOST. If we continue to tie the hands of MARTA, the feds, from which we are hoping to get additional funding, look at us and say, are they ever going to solve the problem, or should we send the money to to some other city? I think it's a serious problem. I think the uncertainty as reflected to the from the fact that you have 3 pages of, well, in 1 year they did one thing for 3 years, the next year they did another thing for 3 years. That's not a way to run a railroad. I mean, it just is not a way to give a professional manager an opportunity to do a really good job in managing the funds. Let me remind you where the funds come from. They do not come from the state of Georgia. They don't come from Henry County. They don't come from Gwinnett County. They come only from Fulton County and DeKalb County. So the people in my 2 counties keep asking me if the state is not going to put any money into this system, which is part of the economic engine of the region, why is it that they have control over how we spend our money? So we have discussed this in this committee several times. We have, in fact, passed bills that eliminated this 50-50 requirement in the past. So I really urge you to consider my amendment with great urgency. It is time for the federal government, the Federal Transportation Agency, to look at Georgia, the metro region, as a region with stability. And with a 3-year this and a 3-year that, I just don't see that they are going to see us that way. I'm delighted that there's lots of amending going on around me, but I have worked on this amendment, gotten some members of the committee to sign, and I would encourage you to pass this amendment, and I will make that motion at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Gardner. We currently have before the committee House Bill 1051. This time, do we have any? I'll entertain a motion.
Do pass, Madam Chair.
A second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? House Bill 1051 passed by committee. And have a 1051. Yeah, we're not on. We're on 1051. Sorry. We're gonna give you a chance, Representative Gardner. Now at this time, we'll move to House Bill 1052, substitute. It's LC 390184S. Do I have a motion?
Do pass, Madam Chair.
Okay. Any discussion or amendments? Representative Gardner?
Thank you very much. Each of you have in front of you an amendment entitled AM 331158, which looks long, but it basically turns the MARTA authority into an independent authority with funding coming from Fulton and DeKalb County, and eliminates what I consider lots of politics in dealing with MARTA over the years. May have been necessary 30 years, but it is my firm conviction that MARTA is able to handle its own business in a business-like way, and that we need, in the interest of economic development in our region, to be done with this 3 pages of politics. So I urge you to pass this amendment, and I move. Oh, okay.
Why don't we suspend on?
Okay.
Why don't we suspend on hers and let her go down and get with Janae?
That would be great.
Okay.
And Jenna, we go down and let Jenna straighten her out on that. And
I think I can do it really fast.
you think you can?
Yes, I think.
You got it, Representative Gardner?
Thank you. Basically, what I would like to do is strike, put a period after 1965 as amended. And
What line?
line
Where-
250, sorry. And strike the rest of the language on pages 8, 9, and 10, except for the effective date.
Through what?
Through 330.
333.
Through line 333. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So we have an amendment to strike the semicolon and add a period on line, thank you, 250, and then strike the language from that point to on 250 to line 333.
That's correct.
Okay.
Interesting, the author of this bill called some of that language old-timey language. It's time to come into the 21st century.
Okay, we have a motion.
Pardon me?
Do we have a motion? Do we have a motion
I move.
and a second? Okay. All those in favor of the amendment,
Aye.
say aye. All those opposed? No. Do you want to take a hand count? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. I'm sorry. In favor of the amendment?
Put her up there, Donna.
Yeah. All those opposed to the amendment? Okay, the motion fails. Thank you, Representative Gardner. At this time, Representatives Davis?
Forget my name?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a first. Thank you, Madam Chair. After discussion with the Chairman Jacobs and some of the other members of the committee, I'd like to offer an amendment, a respectful amendment that I have some grave concerns about the expansion of service throughout the regional area without voter referendum. So I move that we strike Section 5 in its entirety and then renumber Sections 6, 7, and 8, 5, 6, 7. Or accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the Representative Davis amendment, striking Section 5 and renumbering Sections 6 and 7 accordingly. All those in favor, raise your right hand. I guess I shouldn't vote.
Okay.
All those opposed? Yes, A. Yeah, yes. Motion carries. There was a tie. I voted to strike Section 5 in favor of the amendment, so Section 5, the Davis amendment passes.
You voted yea?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Jacobs.
With the help of our outstanding Transportation Committee and MARTOC legal counsel, Jenna Doley, I've got an amendment that satisfies the chairman's concerns. So if I
Okay.
can present that.
That'd be great.
That would be on line 14 after the period at the end of the line, insert and one non-voting member. On line 30, strike the and after the semicolon after Atlanta. Insert after the period insert after the period, before the period, on line 31, semicolon, and one member shall be the planning director of the Georgia Department of Transportation. And then between lines 72 and 73, insert a sentence that tracks the prior sentence, and it'll read, the planning director of the Georgia Department of Transportation shall become a non-voting member of the board on the effective date of this sentence and shall serve while holding his or her state office. It's 11 voting members and one non-voting member that will be the planning director. Pardon me? Yeah, it's
28. Who's 28?
just track the same language. It'll be fine.
Representative Benton?
Yeah. What is the reason for having the non-voting member?
Well, for starters, you have an 11-member board right now. The way, there's two reasons. One, you have an 11-member board. If you add 2 voting members from the state, it would take it up to be a 12-member board, and we want to preserve an odd number of members. That's the first thing. The second thing is that presently there is only 1 voting member and 1 non-voting member from the state. The voting member is the commissioner of the Georgia Department of Transportation. The non-voting member is the executive director of GRETA. What we're proposing here in the bill is to make the voting member the executive director of GRETA and the non-voting member the planning director of GDOT.
Okay.
If you added 2, though, you would be 13. You said that, you misstated. You said if you had 2 members.
No, we've only added, with this amendment, we're only adding 1 member, so we'd be up.
You said if we had 2, we'd be at 11. I mean 12, but if we had 2, we'd be at 13.
Well, right, but we're right. Correct, Mr. Chairman. We the adding the planning director of GDOT brings the grand total of board members up to 12. So we need to preserve 11 voting board members to keep it an odd number.
Representative Dollar. Representative Gardner.
I think we'll need to finish with this amendment first. I have another question.
Okay. Okay, let's see if I have this right. Beginning on page 1, line 14, remove the period at the end after members and add and 1 non-voting member.
Correct.
Okay, then on page 31, page 2? Yeah. Page 2, line 31, after Regional Transportation Authority, add a comma, and 1 member shall be the planning director of GDOT. Yes.
It would be to strike the and after City of Atlanta semicolon on line 30, and then insert between authority and the period on line 31, semicolon, and 1 member shall be the planning director of the Georgia Department of Transportation.
Okay. And then the final change would be on page 3, line 70.
Between lines 72 and 73.
72 and 73. So it would be the planning director of GDOT shall become a non-voting member of the board on the effective date in this sentence. Is that correct?
Correct. The same language as you see there.
Okay. Okay. Any questions, comments? Okay. All those in. Do we have an amendment? Do we have a motion?
Oh,
Okay.
second.
Second. All those.
Roberts amendment.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Motion carries. Amendment passed. Okay. Now at this time, Representative Gardner.
Well, this is a question for information of the author of the bill. So we know that there are significant resources that might be available for certain portions of expansion of MARTA in the T-SPLOST. Were it to pass, how much freedom is MARTA going to have to spend the money that I'm really worried about the whole T-SPLOST failing in Fulton and DeKalb, to tell you the truth. It is my primary concern. You live in DeKalb County. You've heard the news. What kind of what are the current restrictions under which MARTA will be required to proceed, given the fact that the state is determining how Fulton and DeKalb money will be spent? Excuse me for the editorial comment at the end. Didn't need to do that. Erase that. But what's the current state of affairs for MARTA?
The current state of affairs is that the 50-50 split is relaxed through the middle of 2013. It is proposed to be addressed through the transit governance legislation that came out of the governor's task force. If that bill does not pass this year, then we at least have a vehicle that's available to perhaps give MARTA a year or two more until we decide how to deal with the overall capital issue. I think it's important to keep in mind that the 50-50 split does serve a purpose. Now, granted, it is a very crude fiscal control, but it is nevertheless a fiscal control. And what we need to do is grapple with how we are going to deal with capital issues regarding transit across the entire Metro Atlanta region. And part of that mix is the 50-50 split in my view. So the bottom line is that there is the possibility of extending the relaxation of the 50-50 split out a year or two more while we grapple with the more fundamental issue. But I think we need to solve the more fundamental issue before the 50-50 split is finally addressed. Or I think the final addressing of the 50-50 split needs to occur through dealing with the fundamental issue of the management of transit capital across the entire region.
Well, it's very interesting. I'm in favor of a transit governance and transit regional planning. I think it's essential. We are talking about taxes that have been raised for 30 years only in Fulton and DeKalb County. And as I have read the transit governance bill, the people in Fulton and DeKalb County have very little to say about that money in the future. It will be determined by another board with a veto power by the governor. And why you think people in Fulton and DeKalb, I guess there are not quite 2 million of them, would vote for that is baffling to me. So, 2013 is 1 year away, and we're talking about projects that don't get finished in a year, much less 5 years. So, I urge you to think more seriously about some immediate solutions. You know as well as I do, it's a question of whether or not we believe the MARTA board has the capacity to take capital expenditures into account as well as maintenance. I mean, we all know there are problems with the escalators, but we can't focus on escalators. We've got to focus on the future of economic development in our region. And I understand that we probably share the same long-range goal, but to continually tie the hands of Fulton and DeKalb taxpayers is extremely unfortunate and disappointing, and I will say to you, it makes it really hard to vote for the T-SPLOST. People that I know, probably not me, but people that I know are very frustrated. So,
thank you, Representative Gardner.
Call the question, Madam Chair.
Okay. So we have before us now House Bill 1052 as amended. I guess the subcommittee, the committee sub, House Bill 1052 as amended. All those in favor say say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. House Bill 1052, committee substitute as amended, passed. Moves forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, there's no other business, and the meeting's adjourned.